They spat in your food. The crudely scrawled words on the small slip of paper, discreetly placed beside his plate, made the billionaire CEO, Malcolm Devo, freeze. His fork, holding a piece of steak, hovered just inches from his mouth. He was sitting alone at a miserable table near the restrooms, dressed in a way that made him unrecognizable as the owner of the establishment, an old hoodie and worn-out sneakers. For a man who had survived boardroom betrayals and market crashes, this humiliation felt entirely different. It wasn't just a disgusting act. It was living proof of the rumors of discrimination he had come here to secretly investigate. This wasn't business. This was personal. And it was about to ignite a confrontation that wasn't just about reclaiming dignity, but about exposing a rotten secret festering in the heart of his own empire. A slow burn of anger rose within him, and Malcolm's mind flashed back to the moment he had walked through the restaurant's doors an hour earlier. The mistreatment had started from the very first second. "Do you have a reservation?" the hostess had asked, her tone flat and dismissive. "No," Malcolm said, his voice as calm as ever. She let out a slow, put-upon sigh, a practiced display of inconvenience. "We're fully booked tonight, sir. But I suppose we could fit you in at the bar, or perhaps near the kitchen entrance. Would that be acceptable?" Malcolm nodded. "Sure, that's fine." He followed her through the grand dining room, past tables filled with white patrons in designer suits and dresses. Not a single black face in the crowd, except for the staff. That part hasn't changed since the 1800s, he thought bitterly. She led him to a table right next to the service door, where the faint smell of bleach wafted out each time it swung open. No candle, no smile, just a menu tossed onto the table like a warning. And now, as the flashback ended, Malcolm returned to the bitter present. He was still at that same miserable table. The tossed-down menu lay untouched, but the crumpled note with its stark warning was now clenched tightly in his hand. The initial mistreatment hadn't been an accident. It was a policy. And spitting in his food was the culmination of that policy. The sharp eyes of a CEO began to analyze the corrupt system he owned. He watched the manager, Clay, schmoozing by a lavish table. "Mr. Morgan, I do hope the steak is to your liking," Clay said, his voice dripping with sycophancy. "Our Chateau Margaux is a truly sublime pairing, isn't it?" As Clay passed Malcolm's table, the smile vanished. The man barely gave him a glance, his eyes sliding right past Malcolm as if he were part of the furniture. Just then, he heard Clay's sharp voice ring out from across the room. "Naomi, table 7's water is low. Can't you see that? Or do I need to point it out for you?" A black waitress, the only one among them, turned with quiet composure. "Yes, Mr. Clay, I'll get right on it." Malcolm's eyes followed her, and he knew with certainty she was the one who had sent him the warning. A moment later, when she came to his table to clear his plate, he decided to test the waters. "Will there be anything else for you, sir?" she asked, her voice even and professional. "No, thank you," Malcolm replied, his own voice low and steady. "Jackson, table 12, needs more wine. Get a move on." Clay's voice boomed from the bar, momentarily drawing the attention of the nearby staff. It was the opening Naomi needed. Her hand moved with a swift, almost invisible precision. In a single, fluid motion, she picked up Malcolm's used napkin and replaced it with a clean, crisply folded one. To an outsider, it was standard service. But Malcolm, his attention entirely focused on her, sensed a subtle difference. The new napkin felt stiffer, somehow weighted. Before turning away, Naomi's eyes met his one last time. It was a fleeting glance, but it said everything, a confirmation, a warning, and an act of faith. Then she blended back into the flow of servers, disappearing into the hustle and bustle of the restaurant. Malcolm maintained a calm exterior. He didn't rush. He slowly finished his water, then caught another waiter's eye to signal for the check. Only after he had paid and stood to leave did he feign a clumsy move, letting the napkin slip from his grasp to the floor. He bent down to retrieve it, and in that brief moment, shielded from view, he secretly unfolded it. Inside, 3 words were hastily scrawled in ballpoint pen. Basement, midnight, storeroom, back door. A knot tightened in Malcolm's gut. This was no longer about bad service or racism. A secret meeting at midnight in the restaurant's basement. This pointed to a conspiracy, an illegal operation. He realized then that the discrimination he'd come to investigate was merely the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of a much deeper, more dangerous rot festering within his own establishment. He carefully folded the napkin, tucking it deep into his pocket. Tonight, his investigation would take a radically different turn. The Charleston night descended, clinging to the residual heat of a southern summer day. Malcolm waited in his rental car, parked on a dark side street, observing his restaurant from a distance. The elegant lights inside dimmed, and one by one, the employees left, leaving only shadows and silence. At 11:50 p.m. sharp, he got out of the car, his hoodie pulled up to obscure his face. The alley behind the restaurant reeked of garbage and old grease. The back storeroom door, just as Naomi had indicated, wasn't fully locked but left ajar, a narrow gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. Malcolm held his breath, gently pushed the door, and slid inside. The darkness was oppressive, and the air was thick with the smell of damp mold and cheap wine. He moved with the practiced stealth of a man who had navigated treacherous boardrooms, his every footstep silent. A faint sliver of light escaped from under the door of a room deep within the basement. With it came the low murmur of voices too muffled to understand, but clear enough to know someone was in there. Malcolm moved cautiously, finding cover behind a stack of old wine crates and peering through the crack in the door frame. The scene inside left him staggered. This wasn't a meeting of disgruntled employees or racists scheming in the shadows. Under the sallow glow of a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, the manager, Clay, stood with 3 other men in expensive suits. On the rough wooden table between them weren't HR files, but thick stacks of cash, accounting ledgers, and an open laptop. This week's numbers are unusually high. Clay, one of the men, who wore a large gold ring, said in a voice that dripped with authority, "Those party invoices you've been creating look a little creative." Clay let out a smirk, a look Malcolm had never seen in the dining room. "Don't you worry, Commissioner. Every number lines up with our foot traffic. The IRS will never suspect a thing. The cradle is the perfect front. Just make sure the money from your shell companies keeps flowing." Malcolm's mind reeled. Commissioner, shell companies. It all clicked into place. The racism was never the main objective. It was just a tool, a smokescreen. By fostering a toxic environment, a de facto whites-only club, Clay and his associates could limit curiosity and keep prying eyes away. The contempt Malcolm had endured wasn't just the bigotry of a racist. It was the calculated defense mechanism of a criminal organization. His restaurant, a symbol of elegance, had been twisted into a sophisticated money laundering station for the city's most powerful players. Malcolm shrank back into the shadows, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and the sheer danger of the situation. He silently pulled out his phone, switched on the voice recorder, and held it close to the crack in the door. He had the audio. Now he needed the numbers, and to get those, he needed someone on the inside, someone he knew he could trust. He didn't go back to his car. Instead, he waited, concealed in the darkness of the alley, until nearly 2 a.m., when he saw Naomi's familiar silhouette emerge from the back door. She looked exhausted, her shoulders slumped after a long and stressful shift. "Miss Brooks," Malcolm's low, quiet voice emerged from the shadows. Naomi flinched, instantly on guard, her hand tightening around her keys. "Who's there?" Malcolm stepped out of the darkness, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "It's me." The customer from the table near the service station, I just wanted to say thank you. Naomi squinted at him, her wariness not fading in the slightest. Thank me for what? For the warning, he said plainly, and for the napkin. I was in the basement. I saw the meeting. The tension on Naomi's face seemed to freeze. She glanced around the alley, making sure they were alone. You shouldn't have been down there. It's dangerous. I know, Malcolm nodded. And it's far worse than I imagined. This isn't just about discrimination. This is a criminal enterprise. He looked her directly in the eye. I need your help. I need someone on the inside. Naomi was silent for a long moment, sizing up the man before her. Why should I trust you? Who are you? This was it. Malcolm took a deep breath. My name is Malcolm Devo, and this restaurant, The Cradle, it's mine. He braced for shock, disbelief, perhaps even fear. Instead, Naomi just gave a slight nod, the ghost of a smile playing on her lips. I know, she said softly. This time, it was Malcolm's turn to be surprised. You knew. I was a law student, she explained. I make it a habit to do my research. When rumors started about a new owner secretly buying the restaurant chain, I looked into it. I recognized you from the cover of an old business magazine I read at the library. When you walked in tonight dressed like that, I was about 90% sure. Admiration washed over Malcolm's face. This woman wasn't just brave, she was incredibly smart and thorough. His trust in her solidified. Then you know I'm not bluffing. He pressed on, his voice gaining urgency. Clay and his crew are laundering money right under our noses. He's connected to powerful people in this city. I managed to record part of their conversation, but I need financial proof. The real ledgers, the computer data, things you can only get from Clay's office. He took a step closer. Naomi, I can't do this alone. You're the only one here who saw the truth and dared to do something about it. You're the only one I can trust. Help me expose them. Naomi looked down at her calloused hands, then back up at Malcolm, her eyes now burning with a determined fire. She had given up her dream of justice once to save her family, but now justice had found her in this humiliating place. Mr. Clay and men like him, she said, her voice no longer weary but filled with resolve. They've chipped away at my dignity every single day. They think I'm nothing. She looked Malcolm straight in the eye. I'll help you, and I'll take back what they owe. In that dark, grimy alley, a secret alliance was forged. A billionaire CEO and a courageous waitress, both underestimated, and both willing to risk everything to bring the truth to light. The cheap motel room Malcolm had rented under an alias became their secret command center. It was a far cry from the lavish offices he was used to, but here, amidst the peeling paint and worn-out furniture, a bold plan was taking shape. The only light in the room came from the twin glows of two laptops sitting side by side on a desk. Over the next few days, they operated like a well-oiled machine. By day, Naomi was the diligent waitress, their eyes and ears on the inside. By night, she met with Malcolm to piece together the puzzle. Malcolm, with the mind of a tech and finance prodigy, began his assault on the system's outer perimeter. Clay's no idiot, Malcolm muttered, his eyes glued to a screen displaying the restaurant's network architecture. He's set up a decent firewall, and this accounting software is a custom build. He's built a digital fortress. He used his top-level owner's access to bypass the initial security layers, but the most critical data remained encrypted and hidden. He could see the money coming in, but he couldn't see how it was being cleaned. That's where Naomi came in. She knew nothing about encryption or network structures, but with her lawyer's mind, she knew how to find anomalies in a supposedly perfect system. Malcolm showed her the weekly revenue statements. Look here, Naomi. Revenue spikes Thursday through Saturday. That's normal for a high-end restaurant. But Naomi shook her head, pointing to another section. It's not normal, Malcolm. Look at the supply costs. Why are the expenses for premium wine and seafood skyrocketing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, our slowest nights? And why are we only ordering from these 3 suppliers at a 20% market markup? Malcolm narrowed his eyes. He immediately ran a quick analysis on the 3 supply companies. The results came back in minutes. All of them were shell corporations, registered under untraceable names. My God, Malcolm breathed. They're using fake supply invoices to pump dirty money into the system. That's only part of it, Naomi continued, the exhaustion on her face replaced by intense focus. There's also this event expenses category. I work there every night. Last week, the books say we hosted a corporate dinner for 50 people on a Monday night. But Malcolm, last Monday, the entire restaurant had exactly 12 customers. A fatal flaw, a loophole only an insider could spot. Malcolm looked at her with pure admiration. Her on-the-ground knowledge was the key no hacker could ever generate. They're creating ghost events, he concluded. They're booking revenue for parties that never happened, legitimizing dirty cash as business profits. They had figured out the method. The picture of the criminal network was now crystal clear, but to bring it down, they needed the source material, the original ledgers, the transaction emails, the irrefutable records. It's all on Clay's computer, Naomi said with certainty, in his office. That's where he runs everything. Malcolm nodded, his gaze hardening with resolve. Then we don't have a choice. He turned to Naomi. We have to break in. Sunday night was perfect. The restaurant closed early, and the back alley was practically deserted. At 1 a.m. sharp, Malcolm and Naomi met at the rendezvous point, both dressed in black from head to toe. The silence was eerie, broken only by the low hum of the industrial refrigerators and the sound of wind whistling through the narrow alleyway. The manager's master key can open the back door, but it'll trip a silent alarm, Naomi whispered, her voice barely a breath in the night. But there's a broken latch on a window in the dry storage room. Clay always figured no one was skinny enough to fit through. She pointed to a small, high, grime-covered window. That was their way in. With a boost from Malcolm, Naomi, with her slender frame, managed to squeeze through, the process difficult but successful. A soft click echoed as she unlatched the door from the inside. They were in. Inside the restaurant, darkness enveloped them. The smell of bleach was stronger at night, and the empty tables looked like ghostly silhouettes. Naomi led the way, moving like a phantom through her own workplace, every step familiar and soundless. Security camera at the end of the hall, right before the office, she motioned. That was Malcolm's cue. He pulled a small device from his pocket that looked like a power bank. Portable Wi-Fi jammer. It'll create a small dead zone, taking the camera offline for about 10 minutes. More than enough time. He pressed a button, and a small blue LED blinked to life. Go. Clay's office was secured with a simple lock. Naomi, after months of meticulous observation, knew the exact type. Using a small pick set Malcolm had provided, she worked skillfully in the silence. A dry click echoed in the still hallway, and the door swung open. Inside, Clay's office was messy and smelled of stale coffee. The only light came from the idle glow of the desktop computer's screen. Password, Malcolm whispered. I've seen him type it dozens of times, Naomi replied. He always covers his hand, but I watched his keystrokes. And there's a sticky note under his desk. She ducked down and found it in a second. On it was a single name and a number, Caroline 1995, his daughter's name and birth year. The man's arrogant. They were in. Malcolm quickly plugged a high-speed, encrypted USB drive into the machine. This isn't a normal flash drive. It'll clone the entire user directory, including deleted files and browser history, then wipe its own tracks. A blue progress bar began its slow crawl across the screen. Each percentage point that ticked by felt like an eternity. The silence in the office became heavy, and every small sound from outside made them jump. Suddenly, the headlights of a car swept across the office window, followed by the sound of a slowing engine. Car, Naomi hissed, her heart leaping into her throat. She peeked through the blinds. A police cruiser was pulling over on the other side of the street. They both froze, holding their breath. The progress bar was at 82%. Malcolm hovered his hand over the USB drive, ready to pull it and abort everything. But the officer just sat in his car for a few seconds, likely checking something on his phone, and then drove off. They let out a collective sigh of relief. 98%, 99%, 100%. Done, Malcolm announced. He ejected the USB drive, quickly cleared the login history, and closed all the windows. They put the sticky note back in its place, locked the office door, and reactivated the signal to the security camera. When they slipped back out the storeroom window and were standing safely in the alley, the small USB drive in Malcolm's hand felt immensely heavy. It didn't just hold data, it held the truth. It held justice. And it held enough evidence to bring down a criminal empire built on rot and discrimination. They had done it. Against all odds, they had the weapon they needed. Malcolm didn't waste a second. The very next morning, he didn't make an anonymous call or send a cryptic email. Instead, he leveraged the power of a billionaire. He flew to Washington, D.C., on his private jet and arranged a face-to-face meeting with a deputy director at the FBI, a trusted contact he'd known for years. In a secure, windowless conference room, Malcolm didn't just hand over the USB drive. He laid out the entire case systematically. On a large monitor, he projected his own detailed financial analysis, pointing out every suspicious transaction, every fraudulent invoice, every shell company. He explained the mechanics of the money laundering scheme through ghost events and phantom suppliers. The USB with the raw data was simply the irrefutable proof of his sharp analysis. And most importantly, he presented a signed affidavit from Naomi, which he had helped her draft to meet all legal standards. Her statement detailed everything she had witnessed, from the systemic racism to the veiled comments about Clay's special transactions. She was the living witness, the inside eye, the one who turned the soulless numbers on a spreadsheet into an undeniable story of crime. The wheels of justice began to turn with astonishing speed. The FBI assembled a task force. Armed with Malcolm's airtight evidence, they quickly secured warrants for surveillance. For the next 2 weeks, they secretly gathered more intelligence, identifying every player in the network, from the low-level money mules to the high-ranking city officials on the take. And then, the night of reckoning came. It was a Friday night, and the cradle was packed to the gills. The clinking of wine glasses and the boisterous laughter of Charleston's elite filled the air. Clay was in his element, moving between tables, shaking hands with the city commissioner and other powerful businessmen, his partners in crime. Naomi was still working, her hands carrying a tray, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew what was coming. At 9 p.m. sharp, as the dinner rush hit its peak, the main doors burst open. FBI, nobody move. A team of agents in tactical gear, heavily armed, swarmed into the room. The music screeched to a halt. The laughter died. A dead silence fell over the restaurant, broken only by the clatter of a single fork dropping to the floor. Clay's smug smile froze on his face. He looked around, bewildered, and then his eyes landed on Naomi. 2 agents walked directly to the commissioner's table. "Sir, you're under arrest for public corruption and money laundering." "Do you have any idea who I am?" the politician stammered, his face pale. "We know exactly who you are," an agent replied, coldly snapping handcuffs on his wrists. Clay tried to make a break for the back door but was cut off. As the cold steel of the cuffs closed around his wrists, he stared at Naomi in utter disbelief. Amidst the chaos, a female agent with a firm but kind face made a beeline for Naomi. "Miss Brooks, I'm Agent Chen. We're here to protect you. You're safe now." It was a moment that everyone in the restaurant, everyone who had ever looked down on her saw. The invisible black waitress they never gave a second thought was the epicenter of this earthquake. As Clay was led away, he couldn't take his eyes off her. In his gaze, the daily contempt had been replaced by stunning, absolute shock. He finally understood. He had been taken down by the very person he never even considered to exist. A week later, the cradle was silent. A large sign hung on the door, temporarily closed for renovations. The bombshell arrests had become national news. Inside, the artificial buzz was gone, replaced by the quiet stillness of a place waiting for its rebirth. Malcolm and Naomi stood amidst the empty dining room as morning light streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing over the vacant tables. The air, no longer suffocating with the scent of expensive perfume and arrogance, felt clean and full of promise. "I've fired the entire management team and any staff who were complicit," Malcolm began, his voice echoing in the quiet space. "This place needs a clean slate, a new leader." He turned to Naomi, his eyes filled with respect. "I don't need a manager who just knows how to pour wine or arrange tables, Naomi. I need someone whose moral compass is unwavering, someone who understands the value of integrity more than anyone. That's why I want you to be the new general manager of this restaurant." Naomi was stunned. She looked around the dining room, where, just a week ago, she had been taking orders and enduring Clay's rebukes. "Mr. Devo, Malcolm, I'm honored, but I'm just a waitress. I don't have any management experience." "Your experience is worth more than any MBA," Malcolm said firmly. "You saw through a criminal network that no one else suspected. You planned with me, you faced the risks without flinching. You don't just have courage, you have intelligence and a heart that is hardwired for what's right. That's all I need." He paused, his voice softening. "And I know this isn't your ultimate dream." He looked her straight in the eye. "Your dream of becoming a civil rights attorney, it doesn't have to be over. I want to make you a second offer. I will cover your full tuition to go back and finish your law degree at Howard." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes, but they were tears of joy and profound relief. Everything she had sacrificed, every dream she thought she had buried, was now being handed back to her. Malcolm smiled. "You don't have to choose. Do both. Run this restaurant. Build a flexible schedule that allows you to study. Turn this place into a real-world example of the justice you'll one day fight for in a courtroom." Naomi took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the opportunity and the responsibility she had just been given. She looked at Malcolm, not with the timidity of an employee, but with the steady gaze of a partner, a leader. "I accept," she said, her voice clear and filled with conviction. "Both offers." She took a step forward, her gaze sweeping across the room. "But this place won't be the Cradle anymore. We're changing the name. It's going to be rebuilt from the foundation up. This place won't just serve fine food, it will serve justice. Every employee will be treated with respect, and every guest, regardless of their skin color or background, will be welcomed equally. It won't just be a restaurant," she concluded. "It will become a symbol of how courage and integrity can turn the darkest of places into a beacon of hope." Malcolm extended his hand. "I'm looking forward to it, Madam Manager." Naomi took his hand in a firm handshake. In the empty dining room, under the morning sun, a new chapter had truly begun.